Welcome back to Washington Watch. My name is Joseph Backholm, sitting in for Tony today. In 2020, the American Principles Project produced commercials highlighting President Biden's extremism on transgender issues with a particular focus on sex changes for minors and men competing in women's sports. Here's one of them.
Sex changes for kids? Most Americans say that's going way too far, but not Joe Biden.
An 8-year-old child decides, I want to be transgender. That's what I think I'd like to be.
Should 8-year-olds really be subjected to dangerous, life-altering medical procedures? Puberty-blocking drugs, transgender surgeries, and hormones cause permanent damage to children. If Joe Biden is willing to endorse sex changes for second graders, what won't he support? Vote against Joe Biden, a pawn of the extreme left.
That ad was given a rating of false by PolitiFact and called, quote, way too far. That ad and others were pulled and deplatformed. Talking about the same subject, here's what President Biden's press secretary, Jen Psaki, had to say about it yesterday.
Every major medical association agrees that gender-affirming health care for transgender kids is a best practice and potentially life-saving.
What's going on here? Joining me now to talk about it is one of the creators of the ad, Jon Schweppe, Director of Policy and Government Affairs for the American Principles Project. Jon, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thanks for having me, Joseph.
It's good to see you. Now, what is your reaction to how this is developing? You had your ad pulled down, was accused of being misinformation and false to say that the Biden administration supports sex changes for minors. Now the Biden administration says they support sex changes for minors. How do you interpret all this?
Yeah, well, we knew at the time we were telling the truth. We don't run ads that are false or conjecture. Those ads were based on statements Joe Biden had made and that the left had advocated for. But big tech at the time censored those ads, said we couldn't run them. We were prevented from getting those messages to voters before the 2020 election. By the platforms. And yeah, as we've seen, day one of his presidency, Joe Biden went after women's sports, allowing males to compete. And now his press secretary is out there saying everything we said in that ad. And yesterday, she even outlined what she meant by, quote, gender affirming care. She talked about how she meant hormones. She meant puberty blockers, and she meant surgeries. Yeah, she said the word surgeries. So everything in that ad turned out to be true, but our oligarchs in this country won't let us message on that anymore. And it really makes you kind of question whether we're still living in a democracy when that's the case. But, on this issue itself, Joseph, I think this is the fight now. I mean, this is really where we're at. Are we going to let our kids be experimented on and really have their lives destroyed? And this is what the left wants to do. Was candidate Biden as open in his support for sex change operations as President Biden is now? Yes. So that clip actually was from a debate. And, he's kind of awkwardly looking up because the question was coming from a parent of a transgender child. And, the parent, we looked her up. She was an activist for one of these far left transgender groups. And she was asking him, how far will you go on this? And he gave her an affirmative answer that absolutely, I want to give access to all sorts of things for transgender youth. And so that's been their argument. They haven't really hidden this. You might recall Rachel Levine, now the Assistant Secretary of Health at the Health and Human Services. Rachel, who is a transgender individual, has been advocating for sex changes for kids as well. And we had to bring attention to that last year with the help of FRC and other groups. So this is just kind of the reality. I don't think our media friends or any of these folks want to admit it yet. And it's going to be on Republican elected officials to really drive this home and hold these Democrats accountable for such an insane position that, 80% of the country thinks is wrong.
Talking to Jon Schweppe from the American Principles Project, and the ad was given a label of false by PolitiFact, which is a fact checker if those things really exist, but people who consider themselves to be the arbiters of reality, they describe that as false. Did they explain to you why?
No. Actually, this happened to us on the women's sports ad, on this ad. They never feel like they owe us any sort of explanation as to the truth. The reality here is they're not fact checking. What they're doing is they're using their authority as a credible institution to, basically carry out the Democrats' desire to censor opposing viewpoints. And so Facebook, unfortunately, I know Mark Zuckerberg has said some nice things in the past about free expression, but Facebook has empowered these fact checkers, and they come up with these, kind of ridiculous ratings, always, targeting conservatives. And then Facebook carries out the ban and suppresses the ads. And, we saw this in 2020. And again, when you look at the election, a lot of people talk about the potential election fraud, and I think that's an interesting topic. But 44,000 votes was the difference in 3 states between Joe Biden winning and Donald Trump winning. Big tech censorship alone must have made the difference there, especially when you look into what they did with the Hunter Biden story at the New York Post and censoring all of these ads. There's no question that was the difference. And you have to wonder, is that acceptable in a country that prides itself on free and fair elections?
John, you make a really good point, and the Hunter Biden story analogy makes itself, in this case, another situation where they just misrepresent the actual facts long enough to accomplish their political objective and then apologize or don't for lying to people. And in this case, it's like, well, he got elected, and I guess mission accomplished, even if we just took down all the correct information in order to make that happen. But we appreciate your vigilance for truth. The American public is with us, and truth will win in the end. Thanks so much for your time as well.
Hey, thanks for having me, Joseph.